the Black Pen Podcast. I am your host, Dara Harper, and I am a painter, also a teacher of art, and I want to give the mic to my co-host.
Yep, Robert Rosé Greer Sr. Thank you for viewing and listening, everyone. And I am a writer, a poet. I connect with people through design and imagery, and then also a Christian apparel line, which just connects people together and reminds us that we're not alone. And on our podcast here, the Black Pen Podcast, we are all about helping people develop their voices, their confidence as storytellers, by encouraging them to express their imagination and their voice. So we are encouraging people to do so, and we have so many amazing guests that come on. So storytelling has always been a powerful way to preserve culture, the perspective, and to spark change. And today's guest is nothing short of that, right? So who do we have on today?
We have Scott Woods from Columbus, Ohio.
OH.
Yes. I met Scott Woods a few years ago at the Ohio Arts Council conference. Phenomenal speaker, writer, poet, in every sense of the word. I was very inspired, very much encouraged, and very much seen at the time. I will even say a few things we have written down. Again, a poet, author, cultural creator. Scott has spent years amplifying voices, creating spaces for artists, and challenging the way we think about race, community, and art.
Okay. And this is writing, essay, and performance, because I've seen his performances.
Yes.
So Scott, we want to welcome you to the podcast. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I feel flawless right now. Thank you.
Well, that's a great word, flawless. I ironed my shirt today, so I feel flawless too.
I put a few creases in the arms. Yeah.
Well, I am excited to have this conversation. There's a lot of things that I would like to talk about, of course, but we do want you to introduce yourself to our audience and our listeners and give them a little idea of who you are. Who is Scott Woods?
Okay, so the shortest answer is that I am a writer. I've been writing all my life. I've been writing poetry, fiction, essays, all of that. But during the course of doing those things, I began to produce events. I would say I started doing that about 25 years ago, give or take, and mostly poetry. And then every once in a while, I would kind of get it in my craw to kind of like do something else. And so I would produce a music event or produce an art show. And then that just kind of became a thing I kept doing. And so in 2019, I opened this space, Streetlight Guild, where we do all of those things here in Columbus. So I've published a few books, several poetry books and a book of essays. So I always see myself as a writer first.
Okay, writer first. And we're going to get into that, but like poetry, I am very impressed. It's something that I have leaned into this last year anyway. As a writer, is like learning poetry in multiple different styles, the way that I can interact with an audience. So like, I just appreciate the way that you, your craft and how you deliver. So I do know that for me.
So, Scott, you mentioned the Streetlight Guild. Can you tell us a little bit more as to how that came about?
Yes, I love telling that story. So I had been doing a series of events in 2017. I was doing a month-long series of events called Holler. And that was 31 straight days of events, all centered on Columbus Black Artistry. And so every day there was one thing featuring a Columbus artist in some discipline. And there was a poet, music, a couple art shows, dramatic readings, all that. And it was an incredible event. During that event, I was approached by a gentleman named Glenn Kaiser, who had been following my open mic. He'd been coming out to the poetry open mic I'd been running which at that point I'd been running for like 20 years. And so I knew Glenn, but I didn't know Glenn. And he rolled up on me at a holler event and he was like, look, this is amazing. What would it take for you to do this all the time?
Mm.
And I said, well, Glenn, a venue, a building, a space.
That's what's
I
up.
would do this all the time if I had a space.
Right.
And I didn't know at the time that Glenn was rich. And so we did a deal. He said, look, I'll buy you a venue and you do what you want. And that's, the short version, that's essentially what we did.
Oh, well,
And
shout out to
so
Glenn.
since 2019, it took us almost 2 years to get the space ready because we had to change everything about this space to make it do what we needed it to do. And so in 2019, in the summer, we opened doors and we've been open ever since.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yeah, shout out to Glenn.
Yeah.
And then shout out to you for just saying what you needed too. I think that's important for us to just go ahead and say what we need and put it out there because you never know what people are willing to do to support us. But what impact has this had on the creative community in Columbus?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to, pull back the punch on this one. It has been phenomenal, right? We have changed the cultural landscape of my city. When we opened doors, technically, even the 2 years when I was just thinking about open doors, Black artists in Columbus, we were here, great numbers, right? I couldn't have done Holler without them, but
Mm-hmm.
we were not getting gigs. We were not getting residencies. We were not getting grants. We were just not being considered. We were not sitting on boards. We were not getting art shows, solo art shows or otherwise. And so while Columbus at the time was about 27% Black, it's up to about 29% now. It didn't feel like it was 27% Black, right?
Right.
Culture.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a whole other ballgame, right? Now I'm not saying that we fixed it. There's still many, many things that should be done, but we did our part. We kicked open the door, right? And we gave the city a Rolodex and said, here are the artists you've been looking for.
Mm.
And we just kind of kept to that ever since.
I mean, I think that's an amazing thing that you mentioned, like the Rolodex of having artists where you can find the artist, the medium that they're in, and you can invite them to your spaces and pay them, but you get them to your spaces not just for their enjoyment, but for the enjoyment of the audience and people in the community of Columbus. So that's something in Akron I know for sure is something that we're striving desperately to be able to do. And when I say desperately, I just mean that we're just working on it behind the scenes, but we want that feeling for our city to be able to have that.
I love the fact that even with your pursuing your own craft or doing your art, that how that became a catalyst to open doors for other artists to come in and do their thing and feel okay with doing it. Like you said, the Rolodex. A lot of times we create, but we may not feel comfortable or feel like we even have a say in that space. So why should I say I do X, Y, and Z?
Mm-hmm.
But when people put the flag in the ground, as I see that Scott doing,
Right.
put the flag in the ground, we here. It allows for artists to say, you know what, yeah, I'll try this, I'll do this. And I love the fact that it's very encouraging or bringing that space and bringing people together. And I think that's very important.
Right. I think so too.
It could not have happened without it, right? So I, as an artist, I had to consider the things that artists care about, and be honest about that at all times, right? Like I'm always telling artists, be honest about your why. Your why can be whatever it is, but you must be honest about it. That's the only way that you will succeed or be happy with what success you achieve. Now, as an event producer, I have a different maxim, right? that mantra is never let them forget you're an artist.
Okay.
So it is imperative that I stay in the game, right? As a writer, as whatever. And I have not lost the fight keeping that in mind.
Okay. That takes me to the next thought that I have. So how do you balance the storytelling, the activism, the entertainment portion of your work? How do you balance that? Keep that balance in your life?
Poorly.
Tell the truth.
I am generally overcommitted, but so I will tell you that, like, for me, here's what I don't do. Okay, I do not borrow trouble from the future.
Okay.
So I don't worry about a month from now, 2 months from now. I can't do what I need to do today if I'm too worried about whatever. And so there's this this Japanese concept called Bushido, right? It's related to samurais. And one of the tenets of Bushido is you must live every day as if it is your last.
Yeah.
Now, I don't take that literally, but I do that professionally, right? So if you've got me today, I'm going to give you what I got today. I will not let tomorrow get in the way of what we have to do today, right? So I have to stay on top of my calendar. That's my biggest thing, is staying on top of that calendar.
Well, I bet.
And over the years, I've had to learn. We call it selfishness, but that's not what it is. What it is carving out time to do your best work. So there used to be a time when it looked like I never slept, and sometimes that was true. And I didn't realize, and this is like right at the beginning of the pandemic,
Okay.
and I didn't realize how much I was killing myself,
Mm-hmm.
to prove all of the things that I thought that art should do, culture should do, that my city was capable of. And I don't regret those sacrifices for the most part, right? Like, but they are sacrifices. And so, I can't tell you how many poems or books did not happen because I wanted my city to be better. But that's what it takes. And so over the years, I've tried to, balance that a little better. But balance just means say no more often.
Yeah, that's absolutely the truth. Yeah, that's absolutely the truth. I I admire that. I do have that mantra myself too, is not worrying about the next day, and giving all of my energy into what's happening now, because I don't want to short what some might be either watching or listening to, thinking about what could happen or what's not going to happen tomorrow.
But that's hard
It is.
sometimes. It's hard as a natural planner,
Yeah.
not wanting to be the one like, oh, they don't never had their stuff together. Like, so I purposely plan or try to plan to a T for the unknowns. But I will say, in the last couple of years, I've had to stand by tomorrow is not promised.
Right.
And God telling us, don't worry about if the birds don't worry, and anything else, the dew on the grass, if that's automatic, me taking care of you is automatic.
Right.
So live the day for today.
Yeah, for today. And I absolutely appreciate that. That's why we got to prepare and plan, though, like Scott said, and then let the chips fall where they may. So like that's how it is for athletes. You got to work really hard during practice, and then when it's time to play the game, it should be easier for you. So that's kind of how we are in our end. Now I do want to transition a little bit because there is something amazing that you actually have started. The idea of 24-hour poetry readings. Where did this motivation come from, and what have you learned over this time about it?
So I first came up with that challenge. I don't remember what year it was, but it was a long time ago. And it just occurred, like I always think very large, and then I have to scale things down, right? I always start very large, like,
I would agree with that.
Right. And so, and with poetry, I just wondered if anybody had ever done it before. Had anybody read 24 hours of just straight poetry, by themselves?
Right.
I had seen it done with like a rotating list, but I had never seen it done like by one person. And so I said, well, I'm going to do it. I checked with Guinness. I did my research, and I was like, it doesn't look like anybody's technically done this. And while Guinness could not give me a record for it, technically, I checked. I still thought it was important to do.
Right.
I didn't know what I would learn from the actual doing of it until I was doing it. And that's basically how it works. It's a marathon.
Yeah.
You really don't know how you're going to respond to that. There's really no way to prepare for that, right? How do you prepare? You're going to read for 48 hours so you can do 24? No, right? Like that's ridiculous.
Right.
And so I just jumped in, and the first time I did it all wrong, right? I started at midnight. I was like, I had all the poems prepared wrong. I had like 200 books with me. It was just all wrong. But I did it. I made it. And then the next year I tweaked it. And from there on, I did it 8 times before I retired from a particular challenge.
Wow.
Because at that point, I thought I had learned everything that I needed to learn from that experience. And there were a lot of things to take away from it.
I imagine it was.
Now, what did you learn? Like, what? Tell me something.
So, for instance, every time I did that, it was like a crash course in poetry.
Okay.
Because I don't technically pick all the poems in advance. I just kind of put a bunch of poems in the room, and then based on this was the first year anyway, based on mood or whatever, I just kind of picked and picked and picked. After that, I started to schedule the hours. So that made it way easier. I didn't have to take 100 books now. Now I only had to take like 50 or whatever. But something that I learned, about poetry though, is how much we don't know. Like it's one thing to say poetry is ancient and it is vast.
Mm-hmm.
It is another to try to actually dive into it and see what that means
Yeah.
in very physical ways. Like I couldn't do anything else but read poems. I couldn't watch television. I couldn't look at my phone. I couldn't have a conversation. All I could do was read poem, 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 poem. And once you slam about 400 to 500 poems in you straight, there's not much anybody can tell you about poetry. And I really don't care who they are or where they're from or what degree they got. Like, and then once you do that like 8 times, you've read like about something like 2,000 poems or something. Like, got a lot that people are going to tell you about poetry. Like, and poets love to speak in these very absolute terms. Right? They tell you poetry is this and poetry must do this. And I'm like, yo, I read poetry for 24 hours and poetry has something to say.
Yeah.
Right? Like, poetry doesn't believe it. We believe it.
Yes,
so,
we do.
That was, I think, probably one of the biggest lessons, aside from recognizing how vast poetry truly is.
Yes.
Was recognizing that, the more we think we know, the more we know. The more we know.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, poetry is an expression of the things that are in our heart or the things that we've experienced in life, and
See, right there, you just did it.
Yeah.
You just did it. You spoke very absolutely about poetry.
Oh, I did.
And so what you should be doing is saying, for me,
okay,
right?
For me, yes, for me, the experience in life has led these words to come out. And the experience that I know, like today, is the fact that I am staring at this book right here. This happens to be an absolute because I can actually touch it. So, Black Night is Falling, poems by Scott Woods. So, tell us a little bit about your creativity in this book. Like, where did this inspiration come from?
So, that book came out of frustration.
Okay.
So, I had already published 2 books of poetry and a book of essays, but it had been like 6 years since I'd put a book out, because I was building a building, right? And trying to change the cultural landscape of my city, um, and all the other things that come with it, right? Um, but I have consistently been attempting to write several books along the way. And there's a poet here, a dear friend of mine, Hanif Abdurraqi, who I check in with, about every quarter. And we just sit and we rap because he publishes like crazy, right? With
Okay.
Park and and so we check in. How are you? Where are you at? How's your writing? And it had been a few years since I had anything really tangible to offer him in terms of a book. I would be like, yo, I'm very close, da da da. And I had been working on this book of essays because I'd been doing a lot of journalism, particularly during the pandemic. Like I was writing 3 columns a week for 2 platforms. And
Mm-hmm.
that, um, and but this past year, I was like, I've got a desk at home. On the desk are several manuscripts in progress, about 7. And they're kind of in order based on which one is closest to completion. And so the book of essays was right on top. And I'm like, I'm going to knock this out this year. Well, around May, I realized that was not going to happen by the end of the year. And I was like, yo, I cannot go back to Hanif and say again that I am still working on it. And so I said, but I was like, but I got to get a book out this year. I'll go crazy if I don't get a book. Like I was really hating myself as an artist because I was not getting it. I was not crossing the finish line. I was crossing everyone else's finish line, right?
Okay.
But I was not crossing mine.
Right.
And so I said, I wonder if I got a poetry book like around me that I'm not aware of. And so I went through the drive, I went through the vault, I went through what I've been doing. My output as a poet has slowed down in recent years. I don't write nearly as much as I used to. And so I wasn't sure if I had a book, right? Until I kind of got the stuff together and I said, I think there's a book. And so once I started to kind of go through the process of figuring out which ones were good, which ones were not, which ones kind of work, which ones fit together, is there a theme here that I'm not seeing? And there was, as it turns out. I've always been in love with the blues as a musical form and as a philosophy. And I believe that all Black people are blues people. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole rant on that. But the poems were also suggesting that that's what they were ultimately about. Not the music, the feeling, the concept, the conceptual blues, the primal blues that as a Black person hear,
Yeah.
that all Black people, whether they know it or not. And so once I kind of fell on that, that really helped me get the book down to what it needed to be. And then I hit my publisher up and I was like, yo, how soon can we get it out? And so in November, we got it out. So
Cool.
I say all that to say this book comes from not getting the
Yeah. When you start sharing the fact that you were frustrated and not being able to create like you want to,
Mm-hmm.
it took me back like a week ago, 2 in the morning. I turned on the TV and I looking through stuff to just. I've been waking up in the middle of the night. I just said that. I turned on this movie called Where Is Bernadette? I think that was the title, but she was an architect and she like got fellowships and stuff like that. But then life as it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But so Lawrence Fishburne was like an old friend, and she started really telling why, because she was just at some point being a nuisance and just irritated with the teachers, well, the parents at her kids' school or the neighbor, like just little stuff. But the fact when she was talking and his response was, as an artist, with everything you got going on, if you do not create, you will become crazy.
Right.
You will be locked into the nuisance of being angry all the time, never satisfied, all over the place if you do not create.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the sense that I'm feeling. And I also feel that too sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel restless if I'm not doing the work that I know I want to do.
Right.
Instead of doing all this other stuff, what I want to do. And I think sometimes as artists, we just have to be careful not to diminish the things that we know we are here to do. I like that.
Well, this is the thing that, you know, artists tell each other, right? We say, that's why I was talking earlier about being selfish and how we shouldn't necessarily call it that. So for instance, somebody said this to me the other day. He was like, yo, I got to get the writing. I got to get selfish so I can focus on my writing. And I said, listen, man, when you call it selfishness, you make it seem like you're doing something wrong. And so if people want to see books from you or music from you or art from you, when do they think that stuff's supposed to happen?
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Right.
Like you have to go do the work. And so don't call it selfishness. Call it doing I gotta go to work.
Yes, it's a absolute, and that's the only way for us to, I guess, exhaust our creative thirst. Because myself, like anytime I would go through anything, or if my mind is spinning, then that's a time for me to create. It's time for me to sit down and write, or it's time for me to design. That is a space for me to get free, and I think that's important not only for us as creatives, but our mental health as well, and how we stay balanced. At least a portion of us to stay balanced anyway is being able to continue to produce. So the fact that that's something that you thought of and you mentioned here by creating this book, that's something that I think everyone can relate to, especially us as writers and creatives, for sure. Now we are running up against some time,
Okay.
but I do want to leave our audience with some advice from you. You mentioned so many things so far, but what advice do you have or encouragement do you have for writers, young writers that are looking to share their story, and how they're looking to like branch out from maybe just the point of just writing and not sharing to now being able to share their voices on different platforms, and introduce themselves to the world?
My advice is do the work. Sit down and do the work. I know that sounds simple, and it is. It is simple, but it's not easy. And so um, everything that you want is in the work. Everything you need to know is in the work. Every question that needs an answer is in the work. And that sounds cliche, but it isn't, because not enough people actually do the work, right? So it's imperative that you just focus on doing the work. Everything else around the work, getting published, getting listened to, editing, all of that is tomorrow's problem.
Mm-hmm.
Today's problem is do the work.
Right. So good.
All that other stuff will come once you do. We can't do nothing for you as a community, as business, as an industry, as a society, as an art form, can do nothing for you if you do not do the work. If you talk about the work, you ain't doing the work. If you blog about the work, you ain't doing the work, right? If you make videos about wanting to do the work, guess what? You're not doing the work. Do the work. It's tough because we live in a society that gamifies our life, and it forces us to want to share everything and yet nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Share your work.
Yeah.
Share that. If that means you're not on Instagram for 3 days, that's what that means.
Yeah.
That's what that means. Do the work. I promise you. Nobody ever gets straight lost doing the work.
That's reassuring to hear, considering how our digital age is, and everyone feels like their story can't be told unless they're sharing some part of their life during the day. But like doing the work is like that's the pinnacle of being able to show you what I'm about. So you get to know who I am as an artist, as a creator, as a writer, and it's not hard to do, is it?
No, because even what Scott said, the answer is in the work. Sometimes you get to a place, well, I don't know if it's going to work, or is this the direction I should be going? But if you're not immersed in the work won't lead you to the answer. And I have found it at times that when you just do it, it will lead you to the solution,
Right.
whether it be more eyes on your work personally, or something where you have plotted it down where then it will come to and flower out 3 weeks from now. But it's a solution to maybe the agony of, okay, even the whole big thing of, can I make it as an artist?
Right.
Am I going to make it?
How about you publish a book before we answer that question,
Right.
right? How about you put out an album before we answer that question, right? Like, we need to, artists, and this is regardless of discipline, we need to divest ourselves from this idea that we even really know what the right question is about our work.
Right. Okay.
Better questions arrive once you do the work.
Yes.
Questions you can't even predict. Just stop trying to be smarter than your art. You're not smarter than poetry. You're not smarter than music. You're not. You're just not. So just do it and let it instruct you. And not about what it is, about who you are, right?
Right.
Because that's ultimately what the questions are about. The questions are about you. They're not really about the market, the brand. Like, that's not what it's about. Like, the work tells you about you.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I'm encouraged.
Well, on that note, we're bringing Scott back in May for our Creative Exchange Summit.
Okay, here
That
we
the Guild
go.
will be hosting.
Here
So
we
he will
go.
be our keynote speaker.
Oh, that's even better. All right. I'm excited to shake your hand in person
Yes.
and talk about the work.
I hope to see some work. That's what
I'm going to make up for earlier talking about poetry because I started a poetry Thursday and I used a format that someone I was super excited about. I just was like influenced by it where, you know, you would say something in English like we're on a podcast. And then in poetry, I would express this like, which is exactly what you were saying. And you express it like however it comes out. So that part is what you were mentioning to me earlier. So, and that's something I actually do. So I guess being in this format, I just felt like that's something that we should say, but that's not the truth. The truth is express it and let it come out. Let it form in any way that it comes out, and then allow people to be able to gravitate towards it if that's something that they're affected by. So like I can appreciate that for sure. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you in May.
Yes. For sure.
I'm
Okay.
very excited.
All right. Very good. Well, I do want to thank our guest, Scott Woods, for joining us today. And thank you to all of our listeners and our audience that is watching us. And we do want to thank the Knight Foundation for allowing this episode to be possible. We do want to encourage you to visit our IG and Facebook, and then also visit us at www.abaguild.org to learn more about the Black Artist Guild. And is there anything that you want to say as we close out?
Do your work. Whether that's writing, painting, editing, filming, sculpture, finish that novel, finish that storyboard, do the work, and we can all talk about it later, but do the work.
Okay. Pins up.
Pins up.